There's a sense of place here in Missoula, and Missoulians are incredibly fond of this place we call home. And it is unique, unlike anything else that you'll see as you travel around the West.
We as Missoulians are very lucky to have such a large historic downtown district, which is the product of many advocates coming together and writing nomination forms and getting it federally recognized as a historic district with over 500 contributing buildings.
The city of Missoula was built around the Missoula Mercantile. It was kind of your, the place where you got all of your supplies and everything you needed.
That building has been there for 140 years. It's the backbone of this community. It's why this community is here, and I strongly believe that if it weren't for the Merc, that Missoula probably wouldn't exist. At least it wouldn't exist the way it does. That's not something to just shove away. It's not something to take lightly.
The Merc has been empty for around 6 years now, ever since Macy's left in 2010. In 6 years, a lot can change. Missoula is a vibrant town. People move in and out of it very rapidly for the college, for different reasons. And so very quickly, an empty building can become part of the landscape in a way that you only recognize it as an empty building.
The Missoula Mercantile was a place for people who were traveling through this area to get supplies, who were going to go work on the railroad. It was a really important area, and that's one of the reasons why this building was built where it was.
The building that would become the Mercantile was built in the 1860s, right near the Missoula Mills, and then became the really recognizable, iconic building in 1877 when A.B. Hammond built on that corner. It was the place to get all of the materials that a growing community needed. And the fact that it survived 140 years to sort of still be standing on that same corner, to still be mostly unchanged, I think that's impressive, and I think Missoulians should be proud of that and should work to protect it.
I first became involved with the Save the Merc group because I work closely with Nikki Manning, and we had heard about the possibility the developer was going to apply for a demolition permit. And so that kind of got us concerned, and we kind of all came together and tried to figure out how we could help the community voice their opinion and actually get the opinion of the community and figure out what we can do to save this really important building.
There was sort of a rumor that was circulating that someone was going to file a demolition permit for the Merc, and it's a pretty small and active community of historians and archaeologists and preservationists, so rumors travel really quickly and really effectively. I immediately started reaching out to people and saying, what do you know? How can I help? Like, what do we do?
I never thought that Save the Merc was something that was actually going to have to happen. In the past few years that it's been empty, I think everyone has wanted something to happen there, and I think everyone has been sad that it just kind of sits there empty. But at the same time, I don't think anybody ever thought that demolition was on the table. It was kind of a no-brainer for me and for the other people who've been involved in Save the Merc. It wasn't a matter of should we do this, it was how do we do this.
We were very lucky and very privileged to quickly start working with Preserve Historic Missoula, which is a local nonprofit. They've been around for about 10 years, and they're an extremely vocal advocate for historic preservation. And they are all volunteers, and they all sort of have this extensive background in saving historic buildings.
We knew what we needed was to take that energy and that passion that the Save the Merc brings, and that they need to be under our umbrella. And we reached out immediately to Nikki and to everyone else and said, this is how we feel that this should be approached. There should be the Save the Merc organization, and they can be this thing out there, but they're part of Preserve Historic Missoula, and we are actually their shield or their umbrella.
The minute that demolition permit sort of hit the table, Preserve Historic Missoula hit the ground running and said, this is where we're going to put our energies. This is where we're going to put the fight.
As the Save the Merc campaign, we were focused on 3 core values that are really important to us as we advocate for the preservation of this building and other buildings in Missoula, and that's economic development, sustainable economy, and historic preservation. And those are really important as we go into the future as a community. By keeping this building and not demolishing it, we're supporting our local development. We're advocating for local businesses to come in here and support our community, to support our students, to support the people of downtown Missoula and their businesses.
We also have sustainability, which is the second core value. Sustainability is, I think it's something that's very important in this community. It's something that's very important in Montana. Sometimes preservation takes a little bit more money and a little bit more time than, say, knocking something down and rebuilding it. But in terms of sustainability, I mean, the carbon footprint is a lot smaller. You already have the infrastructure, although it needs work in the MRC, as people will say. It still already exists. It's already there, and so you already have something to work with. You're not starting with a blank slate.
Our third tenet is historic preservation, which obviously played a role in the first two tenets as well. But historic preservation is really a recognition that sort of the cultural landscape, as explained through historic buildings, as explained through these really iconic, these really distinctly Missoula buildings, that matters, that sense of place really sort of defines who you are as a community, and that we as Missoulians in 2016 recognize that the Mercantile plays a role in that, and that we would like it to play a role for many, many years to come, for another 140 years. And so historic preservation is as much about looking to the future as it is about understanding where the Mercantile stood in our past.
We as a society don't fund preservation to the level that we should. But that doesn't mean that preservation and economic development are mutually exclusive. And there seems to be this misconception out there that you have to tear a building down in order for economic development to occur. And we know that that's not true. And we in the preservation community have failed when people don't understand that. And it's incumbent upon us to teach people and to show them that, yes, there is a way for economic development to occur.
I think historic preservation too gets a bad reputation, as you want to see the building preserved exactly as it is. You want nothing to change. And that's not true at all. In order for a building to survive and thrive, it needs to make certain changes. It needs to be adapted to a modern use so that it has people who want to be in the space. And that's really the dream of everyone who wants to save the Merc, is to see the building come back, to see it become that economic linchpin again.
The National Register exists for a reason, right? It's to let everybody know so that everybody has a reference as to what is important to our national heritage. The Merc is on the National Register, and it got on the National Register because of its significance nationally. It has to do with the development of the West. It has to do with the railroad as it moved west.
The building is on the National Register of Historic Places, and it was placed there in 1990. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that the building's protected. It's still private property. There are extra loops that have to be jumped through in order to get a demolition permit approved, but for that reason, it can still be demolished, which is really unfortunate.
Developers are offered both a federal and a state tax credit that can go towards rehabilitating. It's also a way to get grant funding occasionally. In the case of Missoula, we are very lucky that our historic preservation law does require that any building that's listed on the National Register of Historic Places has to go through a different demolition permit process than, say, a strip mall out on Reserve.
With the Save the Merc campaign, we've almost kind of crossed over into a bit of activism, and that was a little bit of a hard pill to swallow at first, because I never thought that that would be something that I would be involved in. It's very difficult. It's very political. Professionally, I think it does raise a red flag when your local historic preservation officer completely disagrees with the findings of the state historic preservation officer. For starters, they follow the same guidelines, and they're federal guidelines that should be followed, right? And that's why we have them, so that you have some consistency in findings in situations like this. To look at the exact same information from the state historic preservation officer's perspective and the local historic preservation officer's perspective, to look at the exact same information, follow the same guidelines and criteria, and come up with completely competing opinions, especially in the case of demolition. One recommends not approving demolition and one recommends approving demolition. I think that raises a huge red flag. My resignation from the Historic Preservation Commission was, a lot of people have talked to me about it, and a lot of people have said it made a really strong statement. When I resigned from the commission, it wasn't to make a statement. It was actually based on my personal beliefs and my personal feelings about the state of historic preservation in Missoula at this time. Historic preservation in Missoula is in a tough spot right now, and I think that's before the MERC happened. It's obviously in a tough spot now because of what's happening with the MERC, and I think it will continue to be in a tough spot, maybe even worse, going forward, depending on what the outcome of the MERC is.
One of the biggest impacts of the MERC is sort of that it has played a role in so many individual lives, which sort of aggregates to this community story, encapsulated in 4 walls. In the basement, there is tons of graffiti from workers who spent their working days in that building and made self-portraits on the walls. On the 2nd floor, there's a piece of graffiti that someone scrawled in the 19-teens, and it says, "I'm getting married tomorrow." And it had been covered up, and it had been painted over. It had sort of been hidden, and as you start to peel back the levels of the building, you realize that this is an incredible source of history, and that it has been such a powerful player in so many people's lives. And that's what we've been hearing from the community too.
It's kind of brought some people out of their shell and brought them into a realm that they didn't expect to be in, but they've been willing to jump into and learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible, in order to do something and get behind something that they feel is really important.
I think the response from the community was instantaneous. Really, people were upset, people were confused, people were shocked. Even the Historic Preservation Commission admitted after that first meeting where they heard about the demolition permit, they had never seen a response like that. I mean, the room was standing room only for people who wanted to know what was going to happen to the MERC. And I think that speaks to really the role that the MERC has played in Missoula's history and the role that people want it to play in its future. And so Save the MERC as a campaign is not so much about individuals as it is about the community sort of finding individuals to put a voice through.
When you lose all of the buildings in little towns like Missoula, Montana, or other places around the country, it kind of creates a ripple effect.
If it does get saved, we're ready to keep going if they don't have new owners, to help Octagon find new owners and to really go around town and hope that the community can come together and work out a way to put local businesses in this space and really get it to what we've been screaming and yelling about. Okay guys, we saved it now. Now we gotta kind of step up and get some businesses in here, or help the new owner or developer come up with an idea that's going to work for the community.
To keep it relevant, I would say we need to keep the building, and then we also need to get some ideas in here and that the community needs and the community can use, and that the community can appreciate and be proud of.
Right now, the two sides have not found a way to see eye to eye. None of the people who are actively working to save the MERC are anti-business or are anti-downtown. I think that what we are really pushing back against is sort of this idea that anyone can come in, demolish cultural icons, demolish part of our historical landscape, and then go forward and really radically change the downtown that we sort of have come to love.
We're gonna fight it till the end. We're gonna do what we have to, and if it goes down, I foresee a lot of things being advocated to change within the City Council and the Historic Preservation Commission.
If they can do it, we can do it, right? We make a lot of posts like that on Facebook. If they can do it, we can do it, to show examples of buildings that have been saved and how they've become economically viable in their community.
Win or lose on the Merc issue, the success of the movement is going to be, look at the attention we've called to these issues. Look at what we can do if we focus our energies, if we get several thousand signatures on a petition. It reflects who we are as Missoulians, which is creative people who support each other, who support their local history, who understand that it's part of their future, and who are willing to kind of put their boots down and fight when they want something.